In the soaring palaces of the Safavid Shahs, murderous intrigues against Suleiman and his dynasty were hatched that would reach into his very household. But Suleiman's eyes were on the west, where a fragmented and vulnerable Europe awaited his conquest. The Ottoman Empire encompassed everything from Egypt to Kurdistan, and he now had Hungary as well.
But he had ambitions of going beyond that and actually bringing the larger portions of the world known to him, if not all of it, under his control.
Suleiman's next step would be Vienna. Its conquest would drive a dagger into the heart of the European Habsburg Empire and open the way to the west. But as the heavily armed Ottomans set out for Vienna, the weather turned against them. The heavy cannon that had swept the Ottomans to victory after victory bogged down in the mud. Suleiman had to move on without them. With only light artillery, the Ottomans relentlessly shelled the city. But the smallest breach was ferociously defended. After a lengthy siege, with winter fast approaching, Suleiman withdrew his forces. He was not concerned. He was sure he would return soon enough. He never did.
Suleiman's failure to take Vienna was pivotal for Europe. It was the first major defeat after a long time. The Europeans had been losing and losing and losing. And this was the dawn of a new day for Europe.
But Suleiman had little to fear from Europe. Rival Muslim Safavids and his own family would bring the cruelest of sorrows to the Sultan, and ultimately to his empire as well.
Suleiman, in some ways, serves as a sort of epitome of the 16th century idea of the wise and just ruler who was at the same time a very tragic figure.
In the power-laden world of the Sultan's household, the intrigues never ceased.
The Topkapi Palace, as it was originally conceived, had no quarters for the ladies. The women lived in what was called the Old Palace. But Hürrem always complained about her husband, as most wives would, spending too many days and months campaigning outside the capital. She kept saying she feels very lonely and the children miss him. Well, surprisingly, there was a fire in the Old Palace, fire in Hürrem's quarters. So she had to be moved to the Topkapi Palace temporarily while her old quarters were being renovated. Well, she moved in and never moved out.
Now Hürrem was at the center of power, promoting her own son as heir apparent and immersing herself in a web of deadly gossip and suspicion.
She was incredibly devoted to her husband, and any threat to Suleiman was a threat to her, and she had to get rid of it. The first threat came from Ibrahim Pasha, who assumed titles that were only given to sultans. So Hürrem knew something was going to happen eventually. And to protect the empire and the dynasty, Ibrahim Pasha had to go.
On March 15th, 1536, Suleiman and Ibrahim Pasha dined together, as was their custom. In the morning, Ibrahim's body was found strangled. But Suleiman's desolation and loss had only begun. A few years after Ibrahim's death, Hurrem claimed to have uncovered a plot to overthrow Suleiman, devised with Safavid help by his beloved firstborn son and heir, Mustafa.
This is a continuous problem in Ottoman history, sons trying to eventually replace their father. This happens in monarchies. Succession could become a problem, and it was an acute problem, and Suleiman had his share of it and perhaps did not always play his hands right.
Without hesitation, Suleiman ordered Mustafa's execution, then sat by the young man's body for days, refusing to allow anyone to touch him. The best hope for the empire's future was dead. When Hurrem herself died the following year, Suleiman fell deeper into despair, finding solace in his poetry.
Most of the poetry, I think, was written after he lost his wife, since he talks about the loneliness of being in office, that he has nobody left anymore, and he's dying to join her.
Even if your reign on the imperial throne seems everlasting, don't be taken in. One day a hostile wind will blow and bring to your land of beauty heaven's misfortune and deepest suffering. In all his loneliness, there was only one refuge for the Sultan whose power, like his sorrow, seemed limitless. He returned to the field of battle, to the work of conquest.
He personally led 13 campaigns. The last one was at Szigetvar, which is in Hungary now. I think he knew that this was going to be his last campaign. He personally led it, knowing that he would not come back alive.
In 1561, the man who had ruled the empire longer than any other died in his grand war pavilion, surrounded by his generals. He was 67. No Ottoman Sultan would ever achieve his greatness again. The nexus of world power would move from the Mediterranean Sea to the Atlantic Ocean and the New World, slowly leaving the Ottomans behind. In Istanbul today, the Sufi dervishes still turn with the same prayerful pirouettes they danced in Suleiman's day. It is a meditation in motion, whose mystic origins go back even further, to the time of the Prophet Muhammad. You have become the best community ever raised up in mankind, the Quran assures all believers. Enjoining the right and forbidding the wrong, and having faith in God. Islamic and Western civilization have the same roots. They're dawning in the Fertile Crescent. The monotheism of the Jews and Christians. The classical intellectual culture of the ancient Greeks. The two traditions are kindred spirits, alike, yet very different. Islam's legacy is intertwined with the West's, and to the billions of Muslims who make it the second largest religion in the world, it is a living legacy. An elemental part of the great human venture that is world civilization.
Islam Empire of Faith continues at PBS Online. Click through our interactive timeline to learn more about the history and culture of Islam, or take a virtual tour of the Dome of the Rock and other extraordinary sights. It's all online at pbs.org or America Online, keyword PBS.